Hi there, and welcome to the fifth or sixth? I think it's the sixth official Sage Running podcast.
It's only my third one.
It's the third one that Sandi'S been co-hosting on, though, so that's the important number, really. But yeah, we just want to break down, well, actually, we'll do some sponsor plugs first. This podcast is brought to you by the support of Flora Health Babo Bites. Excellent fruit snacks, great antioxidants. Flora Health, they are a sponsor of mine. They make great nutritional products, supplements, all sorts of things. Really like these Babo Bite fruit snacks. Of course, we're drinking our Avery beer. Both got a chai high. Great for the fall, right?
Yeah, drinking in style with my Harry Potter butterbeer mug.
Butterbeer mug. That's key.
Can't go wrong. It is.
Yeah, you could put all sorts of different kinds of beer in that. But yeah, and thanks to all the Patreon supporters who've really actually made this possible. With their generosity and just being able to give us the time to edit and get the gear and put in the effort for this podcast as well as the YouTube videos. So thank you, Patreon supporters, and everyone listening in, tuning into the podcast, as well as people watching this on YouTube. But I think, first of all, what's in order is a little rundown on Sandi'S successful year so far. It's not over yet, but she's had a great season, especially when you consider her coming back from Achilles tendon surgery, major surgery last year, that had, resulted over years of overuse playing college basketball.
No. It was not overuse.
I'm wrong. Okay.
Well, no, I actually had a bone that was too big and sharp, and it was scraping my Achilles. So it was never an overuse injury. Like, it was going to happen as long as I was a runner.
Yeah, the heel bone was a little bit sharp.
Yeah,
and
it was basically like, picture like a rock rubbing against a rope, like over and over and over again.
Yeah. But it had been bothering you for years, so you finally, bit the bullet, got the surgery done, and it's a major surgery.
Yeah,
you had all sorts of stitches.
Yeah,
and you could barely walk. I mean, it was
about a year
bad.
and a half of not much running.
Yeah.
And I only started training again really consistently in April.
So, I've been really proud of her. She's been really patient building back her fitness slowly and surely because, she started off in the sport running 100 milers, a lot of the longer ultras and having success there, but then to have this big setback over the years as well as, the ebbs and flows of training and racing. But to come back from that and to build her fitness, and now I see her, this year she came out and you've been crushing your hill segment, PRs here in Boulder. You've been doing workouts faster than you ever have, and you've been racing really successfully, especially in shorter mountain races, which is kind of out of your niche, but you're changing it up with the speed. So, just a quick breakdown of the year. You started off with as part of the Dirty 30 series, race out here in Golden, up in the hills, Golden Gate State Park out here near Boulder. At altitude in May, you ran it was a 25K, right?
It was 12 miles.
12 miles. So it was the 12 mile, the shorter mountain race version. Won that, looking really good. First high altitude push of the season in May. And then right after that, going to the Broken Arrow Sky Race, which is in Squaw Valley, a week before Western States. On the same ski slope hills of Western States, except really hard, technical, and steep.
That was like fun terrain, some technical stuff, lots of sliding in my butt in the snow. Like, it was fun.
And that was the 25K then, or 29K.
16-ish miles.
16-ish miles. Okay. Yeah, okay. And you won that by a good margin, and then launching into other really competitive short mountain races that you're haven't done as much in the past, but you've been focusing on now this season. The Kendall Mountain Run in Silverton. That was in July, getting a real close fourth place there. Fourth place there. The top four all came in really close, and actually Emily Forsberg won that. But you were, it was a matter of just a couple minutes separating the top five women on that race. And then finally the most recent performance in Flagstaff, doing the Flagstaff Skyrunning, one of the series finale, basically.
It's the North Continental Championships.
The North Continental Championships, getting a really, really close third place there. And
Yeah,
of course,
that was exciting.
That was a competitive race. I was out there crewing for you guys, and it was Alicia Vargo was first, and then you guys were, second and third. It was a minute and a half, 2 minute spread between the top three.
It was
women.
less than 3 minutes in the top three, less than six minutes between the top four.
Yeah, so
which
really,
is pretty rare for mountain races. It's cool.
Yeah, especially spread out over that type of course at altitude, and you were really gaining ground in the last couple of miles too, where you had to go up. You're going up a really steep ski slope, right, at altitude?
Yes, but I think I actually started gaining on the more runnable climbs before that. It was hard to make up time on the really steep stuff where like everyone's just climbing on all fours. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a great finish, and it really is a testament to the depth of women's mountain ultra trail running, at least in the U.S. Just seeing how close these podium finishes are, and how close the women are.
The last major climb in the race, which is on really steep. It's probably like 40-something% grade. We were literally like using all fours. There's a point I could see like the top two women ahead of me, and then like fourth place behind me. And I just like, wow, this is a cool moment to be part of as a female sky runner. Just to like watch it become so much more competitive, because like in previous years my time would have got me first or second, and I think only one woman has ran under 5 hours there before, and this year the top four all ran under 5 hours. So it was especially part of it. It was cool to see like the women pushing each other and really getting the best out of each other. It was really cool to be part of.
Yeah, and you've just seeing your fitness progress over the years, or over this year especially, is really rewarding to see. And compared to kind of like my subpar season, at least for this summer, you've been tearing up the mountains and trails, and staying really fit and just really healthy. And a lot of that's your discipline and training, hard work, strength training, the actual nuts and bolts of a structured training plan, as well as your coaching knowledge. But then also nutrition and just staying on top of things like that.
Sleep.
General nutrition.
Sleep is big.
Sleep's always a big one, yeah.
It was for like the first time in my life, been getting enough sleep, and that helps a lot. And then made the little switches to like nutrition, and like I think that really helped a lot in the past year, 2 years, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a transformation. We're always learning too. Like I'm learning a lot from Sandy, and then we're always trying to up our nutrition game. Develop more knowledge that way, as well as just mountain ultra trail running training in general, learning from our athletes, learning from people online, hearing feedback from you guys. So
but also remember, I think if you're injured and you're out from running for a long time, you can come back stronger. Don't take that time for granted though. I used that time to learn a lot, which helped me in my personal life and my running life. So can definitely come back stronger if you have running taken away from you for a little bit. Yeah, and
it's hard to be patient, but patience is a virtue.
It's a good time to enjoy other things besides running too, and keep that balance. That it's important to have a good running career for a long time, not just a few years.
Yeah, in it for longevity and good health and enjoyment, having fun.
Yeah.
But speaking of feedback, we got some of your more questions that you want to segue into that? We could start answering some questions from social media. Again, we pose these questions on our Facebook page, Sage Running. We got a Facebook page for our coaching business, as well as, of course, training plans on the website, sagerunning.com. You could check them out. And yeah, I'm still finishing up our 5K, 10K training plan. Hopefully within the next week, though, you'll see that posted on the website, sagerunning.com. All right, and so I'm trying to read these questions here. Or actually, before we get into this, I'll ask you how the race played out.
Well, what do you mean, in terms of the strategy, or
in Flagstaff, your last race?
Well, I know that. Well, I guess what you're asking is how that actual race went, and we
break it down and say your last race in Flagstaff with this competitive field,
right?
people could learn from maybe hearing the
Right.
breakdown play by play.
Yeah, because
So.
I think my training for that race is really good. But I did make a mistake. And basically, I didn't pace it right. Which is hard to do for a mountain race because you always have to be prepared for the races or the hills in the second half. But I don't think I trusted my fitness as much as I should have. And I think I took the first half of the race too easy when I should have trusted my body more and knowing it would help hold up, because I finished the race and I felt really good. And I'm like, I had a couple more miles in me, which is not how you want to end a race feeling. Like, I definitely felt like I worked hard and like it was good to feel really strong in the second half. But yeah, I think I lost too much time in the first half of the race from not going out hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely came storming into the finish, and ideally in an evenly paced race, and this is probably easier with flat courses like road marathons and when I used to race on the track, ideally you collapse right when you cross the finish line, or you tie up with lactic acid right when you cross the finish line. But, I mean, you came flying in so fast, you definitely had more in the tank, and it was a strong finish, and that's a rare thing. A lot of people, I've tended to go out way too fast, but with the skyrunning courses or ultra trail courses, it's hard because of the course profile. We hadn't been to Flagstaff, to those parts of the trails actually, and so we were just looking at the elevation profile online, and you see this squiggly line, and you're like, well, it's a skyrunning race, it's got to be extreme, it's high altitude, it's probably steep, but in reality, those trails are actually very runnable in the middle section.
Yeah, the whole middle section. I guess like with the mountain running I've done this year, I've been either going up a long climb or running down a long climb. And Flagstaff, it was a great course, but it wasn't like that. Like the whole middle section was what I would consider really runnable trails, where I thought like there'd be like a lot bigger climbs. And I think like the fact that like it was like 8,000 feet of climbing, but only like 5,000 feet of descent kind of threw off how I thought it would be too. But yeah, I actually think I was ready for a harder course.
Yeah, the unique challenges of a all uphill race, especially when you're more of a climber than a descender.
Yeah, and I think like that experience too, like I started beating up myself a little bit about it, just like you should have started off like faster, and then like you could have placed better. But that's a really bad attitude to have, and like as my sister reminded me, like what you really need to think is like, hey, like I did really good in a very competitive field, and I learned something so I could do even better next time. And I think just telling myself that over and over again made me believe it. So now I'm more excited about races in the future. Yeah,
I mean, just the caliber of the women's field. Alicia Vargo, for example, was a 2-time NCAA Division I national champion at 10K on the track, and obviously she's been tearing it up in the mountain ultra trail scenes. A super nice person.
Yeah,
so
I really like Alicia.
It's a lot more competitive than it was in years past, for sure. Especially with women's fields and competitive depth, which is good to see. It's about time.
Yeah.
Should
we get on with the questions?
Yeah, we'll get into the questions from Facebook, from the Sage Running page. The first one is from Omar. And he asks, how do I calculate the amount of calories, fuel I need to maintain my running pace? Is there a formula that you use? And
well, you can actually find formulas online. But this is a tricky question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are some... I wouldn't say there's a set formula that I would use, and it's something I'm personally still learning with. And I'm assuming this is having to do with races half marathon and longer.
Yeah.
Because if you're running less than 13 miles, or you're competing for less than, let's say, 2 hours, maybe 90 minutes, you probably don't need to take in any calories, or maybe, several hundred calories at the most.
Yeah, maybe for a half marathon.
Yeah.
If one gel, something like
that. A lot
of
people we coach who run over 130 and a half this is a flat road half marathon, would probably need to take one gel, or they're taking some swigs of sports drink, maybe on a marathon course. And of course it depends if it's a really hot race, you probably have to drink something with electrolytes in it. Whereas if it's a race like here in Colorado, we have a race called the Pikes Peak Ascent, which is a half marathon, but it takes me over 2 hours, and I need to take a bunch of gels doing that because it's a 7,000 foot climb at up to 14,000 feet of altitude. So high altitude running and vertical ascent, vertical climbing demand a higher work output, and that's going to sap through your glycogen stores pretty fast. But all else being equal, I mean, if you're running a road marathon at a good marathon pace, you should be able to go 20 miles on no fuel, and this is at a high intensity, a relatively high intensity. You should be able to go 20 miles on your glycogen stores alone if you've carbo-loaded, and not bonk. But after 20 miles, that's when people usually start bonking pretty bad in a road marathon, at least, and that's when usually people need to start taking gels. But you want to kind of nip that bonk in the bud,
right,
and be taking gels, before that. A steady stream of carbohydrates is usually what we'd recommend. And, people get into the fat burning, which we could get into a little bit, but I don't know if you wanted to go into the sources of carbohydrates.
Well,
or what?
Going back just a little bit. So our thoughts on 5K, 10K is you have enough energy stores, glycogen stores to get through it without a gel, as long as you had breakfast a few hours before, you have plenty of glycogen stores for that. Yeah. So,
in longer races, obviously in ultras, a lot of people say, well, I could fat burn. I'm really efficient at burning fat. That's true. The human body could be amazing at burning fat. And even if we're really skinny as runners, we have a abundant store of fat calories that we could use to burn. The problem is if you want to power up hills and you want to run really, really fast, it's more efficient to actually burn some carbs and to have some carbs coming in. Carbs really, you need that to actually fuel your brain. Your brain is a big suck for using carbohydrates. And you're burning fat at the same time. So famous marathon coach Renato Canova is probably the best marathon coach in the world, especially for elites. He talks about it as, you've got two tanks. You got your fat oils, you could say, and you've got your carbohydrate stores, sugars. And as you're running a marathon or an ultra, they're both kind of draining. Mm-hmm. And if you hit the gas, your glycogen stores, your carbohydrate stores start draining really, really fast, especially around 20 miles worth of work. And
but
climbing
this is
up hills.
For a fast marathoner, or fairly fast.
20 miles, it's still a work output. So the 20 mile mark, people hitting the wall in a marathon around 20 miles is pretty consistent across 2-hour marathoners as well as 3-hour or 4-hour marathoners. So it's a matter of moving your body mass a certain distance. Okay. Not necessarily the relative intensity does matter a little bit, but that's the reason why everyone tends to hit the wall around mile 20. No matter what pace you're going at. But you're draining those fat stores, you're draining those glycogen stores, and if you're trained really well as a marathon runner, ultra marathon runner, even if you eat a high carb diet, you are still very efficient at utilizing fat as a fuel and at burning fat. And you will have to be burning fat in a marathon or ultra marathon. The matter is, how much are you going to let yourself go hypoglycemic? What intensity are you going to run at? And how many carbohydrates can you take in to optimize that performance? And so what we found is usually, a lot of people say, oh, you need 300 calories per hour. But for a lot of people like you, for example, that's too much, right?
Right. Especially I weigh quite a bit less than you. And so I do really well on 150 to 200 calories per hour when I'm racing fairly hard.
And that's in the form of carbohydrates,
right?
But not gels.
Mostly carbohydrates
as much.
No, in the last race I didn't use gels at all. I have in the past, but they kind of mess with my stomach. Moving
more towards liquid calories. Mm-hmm. You get your calories from liquid calories, gels, and whole food sources, of course. But the liquid calories is an efficient way to get things in because for some people it's easier on your stomach, and then also you could get the electrolytes that you need as well.
I think that's important to note here if we're talking about hitting the wall. A lot of people, if they're taking steady calories, they still feel like they're hitting the wall. And they still think it's from not getting enough calories, but it could actually be from dehydration. If you get dehydrated, I've said this in the past, your blood will get thicker, your heart will work harder. And so don't confuse lack of calories with being dehydrated.
Or in my case at Western States, being dehydrated kind of made the nausea worse. I think the nausea actually stemmed from not only lack of blood flow to the GI system because all the blood's trying to go to your muscles, but actually having an electrolyte imbalance that causes a kind of a balance, throws the balance of your stomach off and how much water you could absorb through your intestinal walls and the stomach walls. So, not enough sodium and potassium could really hurt you. And drinking too much plain water could actually overhydrate you.
That's true. In order to actually like truly hydrate yourself, you do need a little bit of electrolytes. Water in like longer races, it doesn't do a good job of hydrating you because your body like needs some of the electrolytes you're losing to like fully absorb the liquid.
Yeah, and it does depend on the weather. It does depend on the altitude. It does depend on the person. There are individual differences with sweat rates and sodium loss. And so, some people take tons and tons of salt, and it's probably too much, but it's kind of a delicate balance with how much of the electrolytes you're getting in versus plain water, and then how many calories you're taking in, especially the calories coming from mainly carbohydrate sources. And there are different sources, and some might upset your stomach a little bit more than others, but I'm not sure if we're going to go into...
Well, typically it's like glucose, sucrose, and dextrose.
Dextrose, yeah.
They tend to be a little bit easily more absorbed and don't bother people's stomach as much. But actually, one point, don't always think like more is better for your energy. Your stomach can only absorb so much at once, especially when running. And so a lot of people find that you can't really absorb more than like somewhere around 300 calories an hour, give or take a little bit. And like, don't forget, like your body is it's good at being efficient, especially with like fat stores. Like even if you're not consuming as many calories as you're burning per hour, your body still has plenty of fat stores left over.
Yeah, and if you've been doing relatively high mileage training and you've been doing long runs where you're not taking in a bunch of sugar all the time, which is what we recommend. I don't take in nearly as many gels during a 20-mile long run, if any gels, than I would during a 20-mile race, that's for sure. And so you've trained that's one of the adaptations of just doing long runs, is being able to utilize fat more effectively as a fuel. And I think a lot of people think, oh, you have to have a low-carb diet in order to tap into this. And yeah, you will tap into it slightly faster if you have a low-carb diet, and maybe you will burn a slightly higher percentage of fat at submaximal speeds, maybe 60% maximum heart rate, 75% maximum heart rate. But that doesn't mean your performance is going to be better. And a lot of those fat-adapted runners, you'll see that they're actually taking in quite a few carbohydrates during races. So there's a difference between long races and long training sessions. I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, like Sandy said, you think about it in terms of like some of my best marathons when I ran Boston Marathon last year, one of the best marathon performances of my life, 16th place there. I took 4 gels over the course of 2 hours, 19 minutes. And I was just trying to be on the safe side, just cramming in gels. And I know earlier I've been quoted in previous years of saying, oh no, I take a gel every 20 minutes during an ultra. I'm starting to rethink that actually, because even during the marathon, it was more like, every 30 minutes pretty much. I take one at 6 miles, I take one at 12 miles, and then 18 miles. And the work output in a marathon is at even a higher intensity than an ultra usually. So you're burning a really high heart rate, burning through all that glycogen really fast, but it is a work output. And so in an ultra, say, I take one every 20 minutes. Well, maybe I cover 3 miles and climbed 500 feet in that 20 minutes and burned it really hot. So that's kind of just the individual difference. Whereas someone else, they might want to take something every 30 minutes if they're taking a 100-calorie gel.
Yeah.
So I think we could finish.
Because I know we asked for like formula, you can find formulas online. A lot of them are based off body weight and kind of how fast you think you'll be going per hour. But just take those with a grain of salt, especially since some of the studies that are quoted are done on cyclists, and it's it's easier for cyclists to consume more food per hour. So just take things with a grain of salt. Yeah,
pun intended. Yeah, the vertical oscillation could mess up your stomach. That's the difference, cycling and running. Next question.
Okay, next question is from Mohammed. I've been running for 9 months now. The first 6 months were dedicated to aerobic base building, but in the last 3 months, I started following one of Coach Jack Daniels' training plans. Love Jack Daniels, so that's good. The current stage includes 2 days of easy running, 35 to 50 minutes, and 2 days of running repetitions at threshold pace. I run around 35 kilometers per week. My question is this sufficient to improve my VDOT value according to the tables of Coach Jack Daniels? In other words, can this help improve my overall speed endurance?
My VDOT value is now 38. So for people that don't know, we're not talking about the guy that makes whiskey. No. Jack Daniels is a world famous distance running coach. He's coached a lot of Olympians. He's written the book Jack Daniels Distance Running Formula, which is probably the single most influential book, at least in my running philosophy. And
he kind of knows the science. Like, he's tested a lot of athletes to really like get into the science about it, so other people can understand what's going on.
Yeah, and the VDOT value tables kind of have to go with he mixes up using actual VO2 max data, but also then looking usually at what you actually run for a race performance, like a 5K on a track. And he tested a lot of elite athletes that would run, the 1500 or the 5K, 10K up to the marathon, and he created kind of a intensity guide based on what your most recent race performance is. So if, knowing if you ran a 18-minute 5K, you have a certain VDOT value for what your tempo threshold pace might be. And you could kind of deduct what intensities you would go at and what theoretically maybe you could run a marathon in if you follow correct training. So, it's good to have aerobic base building. That's usually a lot of easy running at conversational pace. And we don't know what his mileage... Oh, he did say
35 kilometers per week.
Okay, I did say 35 kilometers per week. So, I would say the number one thing that he could do first to improve his actual VO2 max, and I think this actually, Jack Daniels says this in his book, is that if you simply increase your weekly mileage, your weekly training volume, even at an easy conversational aerobic pace, your VO2 max almost automatically goes up. And it's not because you're doing high intensity workouts. It's because you've just developed a better efficiency and running economy.
And your body's making those adaptations.
Yeah, the aerobic adaptations with mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, mitochondria size and density, as well as building capillary beds, allowing better blood flow to the muscles, just makes you more efficient overall, as well as developing the muscle fibers, neuromuscular patterns between your brain and the muscles in your legs, especially the coordination and the efficiency of getting used to the activity of distance running. And since he's at 35 kilometers per week,
not only been running for 9 months.
So he's a beginner. So it would be nice to slowly and gradually just increase that average so that maybe he's getting up to 40 or 45, and then maybe in several months, maybe it takes 3 or 4 months, 50 kilometers per week. I think that would probably be the number one thing that I would do first. Now, once you get to that level of running 50, 60, 70 kilometers per week, you start adding in some intensity, some strides.
Doing 2 threshold type workouts per week, which I do think is really smart and really helpful to do, and that will help overall speed.
Yeah, no, the threshold work is important, but then also just basic speed things. And I think if he's following Jack Daniels, he would do this, but strides would be the next thing. Something like 4x100 meters at, closer to a sprint.
Well, he could be doing strides now even, but it's eventually he'll move into like the VO2 max speed workouts. But I mean, you definitely want to get comfortable with the threshold workouts first.
Yeah, you want to be comfortable with a certain amount of easy running volume, easy paced, low intensity mileage before you start adding in the real high quality. And threshold is quality work, but the actual speed repetitions, Jack Daniels would call them reps. I call them economy types of workouts, but things like 400 meter repeats, 800 meter repeats, as well as the bread and butter VO2 max types of hard interval sessions like kilometer repeats, mile repeats.
And it's important to know for Jack Daniels, reps and intervals are 2 different things with him.
Yeah. The jargon between coaching and philosophies is caused some confusion for a lot of people.
Right.
And just, upping your mileage will increase your efficiency probably across the spectrum and give you the strength to really pull out. We're going to keep the audio going, but the video kind of went there.
Yeah, in other words, Muhammad, you're okay. On the right track.
We got the video back. Sorry, folks, on YouTube. I did that in. So, Muhammad's on the right track.
Yeah, it's on the right track. Just slowly start increasing things.
Yeah. And, Jack Daniels is a great resource. He's got a great running calculator.
Yeah, he does have a running calculator
Smart project
online.
Next question here. This is from Chris. And he says, I'm a 16-year-old running track in New Zealand, and I specialize in the 3,000 meters. I ran 9 flat at the end of the season. Very good time. And I'm approaching the track season now. I currently run about 60 kilometers per week, which is about 37 miles per week. He actually converted it for us.
Oh.
And it consists of 6x400 meters on Tuesdays and 8x200 meters on Fridays, with a usual long run on Sunday and easy days mixed in between to make up the mileage. I was wondering if you guys had any suggestions on how to improve this and maybe more hard workouts and hopefully run under 9 minutes. So is this a different question there?
Oh, Tristan was building off of that. And he, furthermore, can it be productive to focus on two key sessions each week without deviating too much? So in other words, keep improving despite no change in the harder workout sessions.
Actually I could relate to this really well because I ran my sophomore year of high school. I was running the 3K in track, and I actually did run. That was my PR. It was 9 flat. And I really wanted to crack 9. Of course, my junior year I regressed and I ran 9:09. But then my senior year I ran 8:46. So, he's got a good, if you're in school, first of all, you probably kind of have to follow your coach. There's that.
It's good to trust your coach.
Yeah. And some coaches are better than others. Even these sessions actually remind me a lot of my high school track career, or maybe even if you're in a track club as an older adult now, repeat 400 meters, repeat 200 meters. I would say those are probably a little bit on the short side, because a lot of kids, we used to do 8x200 meter, and it would just be this death sprint where, I'd be swimming in lactic acid by the last rep trying to crack 30 seconds, and my form would be all over the place, and it'd be super painful, and you'd be like gripping the side of the track bleachers, trying not to puke. Same thing with the 400 meter repeats. We just go for like fastest possible average. It was horrible. It was nightmarish.
Sorry, I have to add, and going back to Jack Daniels for a second, you're talking about how you felt awful. Jack Daniels doesn't promote doing things like that. He would say, just take things, go like a couple seconds slower, you get the same benefit and not hurt quite as much. And you can save that kind of effort, the 100% effort for race day. Exactly.
You don't want to work out at a level higher than what you race at. And that's what we love about Jack Daniels. He uses your current race performance like a 3-minute or a 9-minute 3K and says, no, this is what you should do your reps at. And actually, if you look at, we were talking about the difference between Jack Daniels intervals, as in VO2 max intervals, versus repetitions. And in repetition workouts with Jack Daniels, you actually take a really long recovery between things like 200 meter repeats. So the nuts and bolts of these workouts, actually, we don't know with Chris here, because we don't know what the recovery interval is. And we don't know exactly if he's running these 200 meters in like a sprint, more like 30 seconds, or if he's running them closer to his 3K pace, which would be 36 seconds per 200. I'm assuming he's probably having to run them pretty fast, so probably closer to 30 seconds, which would be painful. But it does give you improvements in developing your running economy or your speed. And the repetitions by Jack Daniels is always specific to race pace velocity, especially if you're running flat races, if you're running on the track, or you're running on the road. What we'd probably like to see, and the thing that I think really helped me finally crack 9 minutes in the 3K in high school, or even doing well in 5K road races and 5K cross country in college as well, was adding in more lactate threshold or tempo run types of sessions.
Right, just the 20-minute tempos.
Which is actually an original Jack Daniels idea.
Right.
I'm pretty sure. So we'll give Jack Daniels credit.
Especially like the 20-minute tempo.
The 20-minute tempo run is real key. And especially when you're in school or you're a younger, newer runner, sometimes it's hard to hold yourself back on these 20-minute tempos. And I know with athletes we coach, I always say like, no, like you really, it's more like 85% perceived effort or 85 to 88% maximum heart rate for 20 minutes. It's not a 20-minute all-out race where you're positive splitting and running the last mile slower than the first mile. Yeah. So you almost want to start off with like a steady state type of effort. And I know when the few times we did tempo runs in high school, it was more like a 10-minute surge and it was just this all out sprint and it was horrible. So focusing on building stamina and strength in the lactate threshold, as well as mixing in those shorter, faster 400 meter repeats, especially, I'd say.
You could even do like 800 meter repeats or kilometer repeats.
Yeah, I mean, the details are really in the sequence of the workouts and the periodization, how the workouts change over time. So if the workouts never change, a lot of people get stuck up on these 7-day cycles where they do the same thing every Tuesday and the same thing every Thursday. You need to be changing some variables in there. And with, athletes we coach and even with our training plans, one day you might be doing 6 by 800 meters at 5K pace, close to VO2 max heavy effort. But then maybe 2 weeks later, you're doing 6 by 1,000 meters at that same pace, with a 2 or 3 minute rest in between. So yeah, when I ran 8:46 for 3K in high school, I kind of screwed myself up because I did an indoor race and we didn't even have an indoor season. But I burned it really hot by doing 8 by 1,000 and 10 to 12 by 400 meters, and then maybe 4 by a mile really fast. So I was doing all these really hard VO2 max workouts, coming off some 20-minute tempos, ran that PR, but then I burned out for outdoor season later in the year. So not really the best example.
Well,
but
and that's the great thing with like the 20-minute tempos. Like it's much harder to burn out doing a 20-minute tempo.
You can't burn out till you catch fire.
Yeah, and like going back to wanting to add in harder workouts or more, we're not saying add in more workouts per week. We're just saying to maybe replace one of the interval sessions with a tempo and maybe increasing one of your interval sessions with longer repeats. Yeah,
you can only do so many really hard 200 meter repeat workouts, even if you're a 3K runner, before you might develop too much lactic acid and you're going to peak maybe too early. Because high intensity intervals get you in shape really fast, but whether or not they're sustainable for long-term development is more questionable.
And I think that's huge for high school runners to know that doing high intensity intervals year round is not sustainable for most people. Like maybe you get through it for like a few years, but if you're doing high intensity intervals a couple of times per week throughout the year, it could definitely lead to burnout mentally and physically.
Yeah. I mean, they're just inducing high amounts of lactate. Your body, you get natural buffering adaptations. But yeah, you're not going to be able to have that extra breakthrough without reestablishing aerobic base and maybe upping the mileage. But with the 20-minute tempos, is something you could do more year round.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more sustainable. And this goes with 5K and 10K runners and half marathoners even too, because I know a lot of our listeners do those events, and it's the same sort of deal. Anything half marathon and below, basically the limiting factors, how much lactate builds up, and that's what tires you out, is lactic acid buildup in the muscles. And your VO2 max kind of limits you, but
good luck breaking 9 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive. I mean, you're obviously got a lot of talent for running, and that's a phenomenal time for someone that age.
Okay, so last question for today is from Jamie. How hard is too hard to run on your runs? I understand the 80-20 rule, which means 80% of your runs easy, 20% more faster type running. But is it bad for you to run fast during your runs out of aerobic zone at a lot of the time? I just like flying on the trails, but if I'm not really benefiting, then it might not be worth it. This is a good question.
Yeah, no, it's really applicable to a lot of events, from the shorter track events to ultra marathons.
I think the easy answer would be yes, like it would hurt you over time to not take some of your runs truly easy, or it's at least going to delay your recovery and getting the maximum benefits out of like the truly harder runs.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it will benefit you, but the caveat is your risk for injury skyrockets exponentially.
Exactly.
So if you're on, you're pounding out every day, steady and hard.
It's true. Like you could get good really fast, but it's not sustainable for months at a time.
You'll get in shape, but the stress on the skeletal muscular system with overuse injuries and getting tendonitis or stress fracture is going to be a lot higher. And then as Sandy already said, basically, when you want to focus on really key targeted workouts, like a targeted long run or a targeted speed session or a tempo run, VO2 max type of effort, your legs might be totally pooped because you went too hard the day before when you're supposed to go really easy. And you have this cumulative fatigue building up that could cause overtraining and cause you to bomb all your important workouts where you're actually supposed to run fast. So, run hard on your hard days, easy on your easy days.
Right.
It's kind of the basic thing.
Yeah, I totally understand like wanting to fly on the trails all the time, but now and then just stop to smell the flowers for the fall leaves right now.
Yeah, and it's all relative because it is hard sometimes to gauge, especially on the trails.
It is.
How fast or how hard you're going. So you have to be honest with yourself and your experience level. General rule of thumb is, can you carry on a conversation with a friend? Like, are you enjoying it, or are you kind of like, oh, I'm really hurting, and you're constantly checking your splits, which could be a really frustrating endeavor on the trails, especially when you're running uphill. So, if you feel good, sometimes you could go with it, especially depending on the phase of your training. So if you're not doing a lot of speed sessions or quality workouts, there are some days where an easy run may turn into some sort of up-tempo run.
But it kind of comes naturally. And so, I guess in our own training, it might look like this. Like, have a hard workout one day, or I should say challenging workout. Next day is truly easy. Then maybe that third day, you feel pretty good, and you add in a couple more moderate up-tempo pace miles.
Yeah, but it's got to be a day where you're feeling the flow, and you're just kind of in the zone.
Yeah, like you're already feeling good.
Which is kind of a rare thing, actually, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, when I trained at Hanson's Brooks Marathon Olympic Development Marathon Group, a lot of times our easy days, some of the guys would want to roll like 6-minute mile pace. And for me, that was just too much most of the time. So, but some days it would be okay. But then some days, a lot of guys also got injured and raced kind of inconsistently. So, it's a toss up. It depends on the durability of the person and their mentality. But yeah, you can't, I wouldn't say, most people probably run too hard on their easy days in general.
I would totally agree with that.
So you have to be honest with yourself, and you don't want to get sucked into other people's paces or get too competitive with yourself all the time.
Or on Strava,
always chasing after your personal best or course record when it's supposed to be an easy day. Because if you have a training plan and you're following that plan and you actually have a hard day, you need to make sure you could still hit that. And then you want to make sure you also just stay healthy. And, most people, they're either going to overtrain or they're going to get an injury, and then they're going to be out for a long time, and that's going to be rough.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone for your questions. We'll post a status again on Facebook asking for questions. If you posted last time when we didn't get to you, don't be afraid to post your questions again. Sometimes it just depends who posts their questions first, because more people will see the questions. So keep posting your questions. Yeah,
definitely. And keep checking back to that Sage Running Facebook page as well as the website where this podcast will be posted. Thanks for following on the YouTube channel as well. There's a car out there, Bong. Definitely stay tuned for more Sage Running podcasts. We really appreciate you tuning in, and thanks to the Patreon supporters.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.